Here's Jones. Jones fumbles, and he was offside when he went to the zone. Just hasn't come off the last couple of times for Sean Jones, has it?
No, just bouncing puck, but I mean, in his defence, he hasn't really been on the ice a lot, so he's just got to get accustomed to the puck again. And once he does, he was having a good go at the end of last year, so I'm sure he'll pick it up again. He played a good game. The first game he played a good game too.
All the way down to just outside the mistake zone. Plays off one by the ice. I think under 2 minutes to go in the first. Kahu Joyce now playing left wing. Throws it down. Trapezoid here, so Woodlands is able to go through a bit of an excursion and go a bit Padiwar on us and play the puck wherever he wants. Manchin trying to get it back into the zone. Does, but Mustangs are there to fire it off the boards. Manchin stops it, going as far as it needs to go. Puck is in contention here in the middle. Burke just legally controls it. Up against the boards. Manchin swings around, picks it up. Up and away. Cotter, the score of the second. Gets it up, finds Burke. Burke hit hard. And hits are flying now. Here's Rilnick. Tried to find Kahu Joyce. He was streaking down this left-hand side. He was not found. Cotter. Calm things down with less than a minute to go in the first period here. Working hard. Couldn't find Veryason. Exits the zone. Back in. That's going to be offside, and he knew it. Well, Matt Knox. Looks like Knox is now joined that Burke and Veryason line. Interesting they made the change. Warren scores, and then he's off the line. It's not what you that works.
It could just be on the line change, though, because it looks like he's back. So.
It's not only is Warren scoring goals, he's getting off the ice when he needs to.
Well, 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 let's get this show on the road, shall we? Hey! Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works, I think is the key thing here. Oh boy. So, we're just going to pull the chat up on my phone. Because this is all a bit different doing it this way. If I do that, is that going to work? This is all so new. It's all scary and weird, and I don't know if it's all going to work or not. I've changed position because I've kind of had to get stuff to work properly. But here we are. You can't see the fridge. You can see you can see a different angle. I'm in the same room I usually am in, and stuff appears to be working. So we're just gonna give people a minute to get in. And the like, mostly just because I want to just see if things are working. If it is, I did get new toys. Kev. It's really, really exciting. I am just playing around with bits and pieces still, so don't fret too much on that front. Mostly just because the I wanted to give it a go. I said eventually I was going to get around to kind of doing these bits and pieces, and it was important that I kind of kept myself to it. We'll talk about it in a bit, and kind of go from there. But yeah, so we're going to give this a go. This is going to be different, is all I'm going to say today. I think is probably the best way to describe it. So we will give it a try, and we'll see how it works. And given that we're a little bit into this now, I wish it was that. I wish I was that organised, to be honest, Kev. Either way, we grit our teeth. We will give it a crack, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Fair enough. You do. We'll be here for about an hour. We'll be here for about an hour. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid, all beyond the binary. It is Wednesday night. It is just after 8 p.m. and welcome back to the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, and we are here for the next hour to take you through all of the mixings, machinations, the wild and weird and wonderful world that is the National Ice Hockey League here in Britain. We will focus on the National Division. That is our main port. That is our bread and butter. However, we will of course endeavour to go across the whole lot, everything from the National Division as well to Divisions 1 and Division 2 in the north and in the south. And for those of you who may have noticed, yes, I got a new toy. I decided to be brave and decided to get some actual streaming software. Before we kick off and I do my usual bits and pieces, big shout to a bit of a random person who asked about this, but it's Deacon Fielder, Telford Tigers defenseman, but Deacon streams on the regular here on YouTube. I did ask his advice, kind of what software to try out. He recommended what I got, which is OBS, and apparently lots of people use it, and it's really good, and so on and so forth. So giving it a crack, giving it a whirl, seeing what happens, and if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, then I've got the option of going back to what I did before, which was just pointing the web camera at my face. But we are going to give it a go. If you tuned in before we sort of started and I went live, you did get to see the Yarra Cup, Melbourne Ice versus Melbourne Mustangs from 2021. So enjoy that. That's what I might do every time. Instead of just, I haven't got an actual test card at the moment. So if you're watching and you want to help design stuff for this, because my design skills are zero. I am a writer. I am not an artist in any way, shape, or form. So if you wanted to design something for the stream, whether it's like a title card or something like that, like a thumbnail thing to kind of put on the streams, that'd be massively appreciated. OBS is what we use, not a massive surprise Volio. Thank you for joining, of course. But yeah, so having a crack, trying something different, trying to make it better than it was before. Either way, before we really get rocking and rolling, a few things, of course, that we do need to touch on before we get going. If you're watching live, please do share this out on your social media platform of choice, Facebook, Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram. Stick it on the leg of a carrier pigeon and send it up north, whichever you so prefer. But the more people who join in, the more fun we can kind of have doing these bits and pieces. It's not me talking for an hour. Conversation is what we're here for. Let's all have a chat about hockey. We love hockey, and that is why we're here. But of course, if you are, and you can, of course, share your bits and pieces, your opinions and so on, in the chat function, which I don't know what side that is. So it's somewhere around here. It's one of these sides of the screen. I don't know how this is working now. It's so easy on my old setup. But yes, so if you're going to use the chat, please do stick in questions, comments, anything that you want to throw in. It's always appreciated. But of course, if you are doing that, please do remember the golden rule here at BOTW. DBAD, don't be a dick, be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings in the chat. It is appreciated. The other thing, of course, that we need to talk about before we start is the website, bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. That's where I've been writing about Basingstoke Bison and doing a bunch of other bits of writing for the last nearly 12 years now. Yeah, we're at 11 years and 11 months at this point. But yeah, lots of stuff focused on the Basingstoke Bison. That's what I started out doing. So player comings, player goings, match reports, all kinds of great stuff to do with the Bison, as well as our Hockey Stories series. So there. Is that where the chat is? There. Am I pointing at it? Please tell me I'm pointing at it. But either way, yeah, Hockey Stories, which is our series which delves long form into the weird, wonderful and wacky world that is ice hockey. We go back into the 19th century up to the present day. We go behind the Iron Curtain, into world wars, all kinds of crazy stuff that's happened. And I should say, working on a new piece right now. A bit more of a contemporary piece more than a historical piece, but got some stuff in the works. Got another interview lined up for that. I'm actually interviewing a couple of people for this piece because it's a bit more thematic, shall we say, rather than necessarily doing it about a certain set of events per se. But either way, that's all great stuff. That is all there, of course, along with the back catalogue of the BOTW podcast and our tabletop free to download game, Dice Hockey. That's all there. bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Well, welcome to the new world here at BOTW Towers with things that like software that does stuff. So bear with us on this stream because, like I say, last week, and thank you very much for everybody who persevered with us last week, where the internet just threw an absolute wobble. Didn't want to play, changed room. So if you enjoyed the hockey room, I hope you did. That's great. But yeah, some weird bits there in what we call the library here at BOTW Towers, where all of our books are stored. All three of our books, sets of our books are in there. So there's mine, my wife's, and my son's. Hopefully, cross fingers, this is going to be all right, and the quality of the stream is going to hold. It might dip in and out. We're going to see how it goes and kind of rock it on from there. Either way, let's have a look at a few bits and pieces, and mostly let's just click back into last weekend. We'll start in the National Division, he says, pressing the magic button, because that takes us over to, if you haven't seen it, the National Divisions page on the EIHA website. So here is what Sportle looks like. If you've not had a chance to have a look at bits and pieces, I can even move around. I'm in the top of your screen there and you can see me. But of course, we do have to skip back to last Friday evening, which is where everything kicked off in Peterborough. The Phantoms and the Seahawks. Now, of course, we can see that, well, the Phantoms, they didn't take too kindly to being behind at the end of the first period there. Nathan Salem and Jordan Fisher putting the Seahawks 2-1 up over Corey McEwen's goal for the Phantoms. Then the second period is all Peterborough there. Padlek, Sisenis, Sladkovsky and Markey almost putting the game beyond reach at that point. Jordan Fisher, though, does pull one back just before the end of the second to make things a little bit on the dicey side. Owen Bruton then makes it 5-4 with a few minutes to play. However, Corey McEwen with the empty net goal, killing things off there. I mean, if you're Hull, you're going to feel like you're starting to really get into games. And I think this is kind of the thing for Hull now, is that they've lost so much, they don't quite know how to get themselves over that line, really, which I think is the worrying bit for them. Losing does become a habit. Of course, we do know things do get a little bit better for the Seahawks as the weekend went on, but ultimately, I think certainly this, we expected this result. I don't think any of us kind of thought that Hull would initially come out of that game with the points on that one. But also the big thing there for Peterborough, of course, is, and we've talked, a lot of us have kind of talked about it. Well, now before you show your search history, incognito browser is your friend. Cigalo is probably what I'd say on that one. However. But yeah, in terms of Peterborough, the big thing there is just that depth of scoring now. They've got guys fit. Sisenis, Sladkovsky, Padalek, even Leo Markey getting in and getting a goal there as well is massive for them. Phantoms have a nasty habit of letting teams back into games. There's a difference between letting teams back in and losing them, though, and I think that's kind of the thing I've mentioned. I've sort of mentioned a little bit in the write-up from the Bison Pitbulls game from the weekend, is that there's kind of the difference between a group that knows what they're doing in that sort of circumstances. They do let a side back in, and a team that's still learning that aspect of bits and pieces. And speaking of that game, speaking of that game between the Bison and the Pitbulls, we'll have a quick scoop at that now. Bison winning 5-3 in that one. I mean, go and read the write-up I've just done about it is probably what I'd say on this one, because I did manage to get some depth. Good to be able to see highlights of that game, unlike the one against Swindon. Shush. The poor Bison video team have had a bit of a year of it, unfortunately, with sort of personal circumstances and stuff, which is frustrating for them and frustrating for the club, because they'd obviously like to be consistent. But hey, we can't be the only ones accused of vaulting the footage, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, this game, like I say, go read the write-up I've done today, where I've sort of gone in depth about bits and pieces. It should be said here that the goal from Callie Robertson to make it 3-3, oh my days, what a worldie of a goal this is. Takes the feed, sends both Neil Leard and Tom Banner to the shops with it. A superb goal. To then beat Alex Mehta as well. I really hope we get footage of this, because it would be really, really good if we could. But either way, really impressive goal. And I like Bristol. Bristol are a fun team to watch. I really enjoy them. And I've criticised them in the past for being a bit sort of playground in terms of their football, in terms of playground football style, sorry, in terms of their hockey. It feels like everybody's sort of just running after the puck and not keeping their shape. They've gotten better at keeping their shape, but the real big miss here was Owen Sobchuk. Lack of Sobchuk was huge for the Pitbulls. They just lacked that creative nous that they really needed, I think, on this one. But yeah, goals for the Pitbulls there. Josh Shaw, Elliot Lewis and Callie Robertson. And for the Bison, George Norcliffe, 2 from Gail Lebwele and 2 from Marcel Balach, who have just been really, really, really clicking in right now. And that's huge for the Bison as well, actually, is to get both of those guys really starting to kind of fire on all cylinders. And I think the big change, actually, from an Ashley Tate perspective is that he had sort of tried to spread the offense across the lineup and kind of have make it 3 lines that were kind of able to score irrespective. But actually sticking what are their 3 naturally best attacking players of Balach, Lebwele and Zach Milton on a line together has really, really proven dividends, especially when Alex Sanford comes into the lineup for the Bison, because him and George Norcliffe are almost telepathic at this stage, which means that it's much, much easier for them to kind of be able to do bits and pieces and to act as a really productive second line behind that top line of Lebwele, Balach and Milton. Rumour Max Mabray to Bristol injury cover. Yeah, I've heard similar. Not announced, of course, by the club, but we'll see what happens on that one. Looking at other games, of course, from the weekend, the Bees with a much needed home win over the Raiders. Bit of a surprise result, although the Raiders are somewhat prone to do this. Kev's mentioned there in the chat about Peterborough sometimes having this habit of letting teams back into games. Romford have a habit sometimes of playing really, really well, just having an absolute brain fart of a game, and this is probably one of those games there. Ryan Webb, Wilstead with 2, of course, because he ends up scoring the empty netter, and Brendan Walker with the goals there for the Bees. Blas Novak and Matej Gomacic with the goals for the Raiders in that one, and that is not a loss that Sean Easton's team will have been wanting to take in this one. Mostly because if you're heading into a ring against a team that has a really poor record and you're kind of cementing your playoff spot, like for Romford it is a losable game in that kind of sense. They're able to get away with it in this circumstance because it's going to be a bit of a stretch to get 5th for them. It's going to be they can't really drop down unless they have an absolute mare. But you want to win those games because momentum is king, right? And ultimately, if Swindon starts slipping up, 5th isn't suddenly out of place. But if they start dropping down, then the Bison have got 3 games left against Romford. You lose bad games, but suddenly you lose 3 of those 3 to those Bison, or Bison get 5 of 6 points, for example. Basically, like a suddenly crawling towards 6th rather than being locked in 7th or 8th, for example, and that could be problematic for the Raiders there. Given that I know Mr. Graham is in chat, he will probably be very, very happy with the next one, of course, which was the absolute demolition job that Swindon did on Saturday evening at home. A 5-goal third period from the Wildcats in this one to just stomp past the Telford Tigers. Telford hanging around for a little while, but then unfortunately just not really getting much of it. Only 3-2 down in the early stages of heading into the early stages of the third period. But then, as you can kind of see from the times of the goals there, Rory Herman scores that 3-2 goal with 13:51 left to go. But then almost an instant response, and from there the Wildcats just kind of break the back of the Tigers. Brad Day pulled from the net as well, and this is the thing with Swindon. The cardiac cats, they're the bipolar cats, whatever you kind of want to call them this year. But they are, when they need to kind of turn it on and they get going, they really, really can get going. You think, and Bebra scoring from defence as well. He's slowly started to settle into that new role. But it's not just Nelen Malazinski. I can see in there, obviously Jamie's mentioned in the chat, Tomasz Malazinski now with 90 points for the season, but him and Nell have obviously got a lot of points because they're the top line. A lot of that offense kind of flows through them. But if they can start getting a little bit more, they don't need too much more, but if they can start getting more points out of their second and their third lines, and some of the younger guys kind of chipping in more with points here and there, they're going to be a real issue come playoff time. I was chatting to my friend Paul Moody earlier today, And the sort of the general consensus in Basingstoke is that come Saturday against Swindon, the Bison can take the Cats, but they've got to find a way to keep Malazinski quiet. They've got to find a way to keep Nell quiet. And the problem is that conversation spirals about just keeping the whole roster quiet, and it becomes a bit of a problem there. For them. For the Tigers, I mean, they just feel like they're in free fall at the minute. Obviously, they've made these changes. Herman coming in, Carlon, O'Flaherty coming in, but they just don't seem to be able to kind of bridge that gap and be able to kind of get those wins that they really, really need to get. And the thing is as well, so Tommy Watkins is not a bad coach. He's not a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination. He's got the ability. Telford didn't win league titles by having tons of superstar firepower. They won league titles because they were well coached and well drilled and stuck to their game plan and ground out 2 National League titles back to back. They're not bad, but it just doesn't seem to be working for them at the moment this year, and that's going to be frustrating. And then Saturday night, of course, we do need to talk about the big one. From Saturday, and I haven't scrolled the screen up far enough for that one. But Leeds and MK, and I think it was you, Jamie, who put this in the chat earlier. Problem for Telford is it feels like if you can shut down their imports, there's not much else. Certainly for me, it feels like with Telford they lost some really, really key pieces and didn't replace them. How big was Austin Mitchell-King in the scope of things from last year to this year? Losing Bailey Harewood early on in the season, how much has that sort of played on it? And of course, really the thing for Telford is the loss of Jason Silverthorne this year. How much of a heartbeat, how much of an engine was Jason for Telford? And you think of just how bad it's been. And that's no slight on Rory Herman, of course, being released by Cardiff, his first year as a pro, having only sort of turned pro early in just after Christmas, just before Christmas, in fact. But yeah, to be expected to kind of fill that role and do all of that work in your first season as a professional, that's hard work, and I don't envy the guy at all. But it certainly seems like he's prepared to get stuck in, and if you're prepared to get stuck in, you'll be popular in Telford. That's generally how I'd see that. But yeah, the big one, Saturday night in Leeds, and a 5-4 overtime win for the Lightning over the Knights. And we learnt the Knights are certainly fallible, and this of course being the Knights' only game of the weekend, they'll be even more frustrated that they weren't able to do the business here. But a late goal from Sam Talbot on the power play, and then an overtime winner from Sean Norris puts the Lightning over the line, put them into a position where they felt kind of going into Sunday they'd be on for really, really big things. And I think, the impact of this game on their Sunday game is what we'll talk about in a minute. But certainly all of the usual suspects kind of on the score sheet for both sides there. Kieran Brown with 2, Cole Shudra and Matt Hayward for the Knights. Sam Talbot with a couple. Sean Norris, of course, with a couple, and even Rio Grinnell Park as well contributing to the scoring there. And you look at that goal. Yes, Sam Talbot's involved in there as well, but Grinnell Park and Barnes Garner adding in points. And again, this is kind of the thing that we need to see. From these teams at the top end, it's not just the big guns scoring. The guys in the depth need to contribute as well, especially in a league like this, where so much focus will go on shutting down those top end guys. Read my post on Twitter today where I explained the spooky coincidence in the last 2 games between MK and Leeds. Yeah, I did have a squint at that, Jamie. I think certainly, you're certainly very, very interesting about where those kind of goals come and kind of how it works in terms of that scoring. It has been very, very interesting. Advise everyone to watch the Sean Norris winner. Yeah, I've heard it's meant to be very good. I have heard it's meant to be very good. Haven't had the opportunity to check it out just yet, but I will make sure that I do. Which then, and I'm doing this because this is the really annoying way Spordler's got everything set up for the National Division on at the moment. The last game is on the next page, which was Hull winning, not just winning away in Sheffield of all places. So certainly, and just a huge confidence booster for Matty Davis's team. 2-2, of course, after the first period there. Santana and Nathan Salem cancelling out the goals from Cam Brownlee. But then a scoreless a scoreless second period, and then in the third, the Seahawks just managed to find a way to do the business. Speck and Salem getting the goals. Another point for Declan Balmer, who's probably having one of his better seasons in terms of his points production here. Jordan Buesa gets one back late for the Dogs, but it's just not enough. And just a huge, a really big confidence boosting win. But again, you look at the shots there. In terms of the amount, not tons and tons of shots put on net. Pretty decent. That's why there's not many shots put on net, because someone's not bothered to put in the third period shots. Top job there, Spordle. But either way, that's a solid performance and kind of what you need out of Jordan McLaughlin and Curtis Warburton if you're Hull. It's just being able to kind of steal games like that. Sheffield's not an easy place to play. The Steel Dogs, we all know, are not an easy team to play, but they do feel a little bit this season at times, a little bit like the Swindon, where they will absolutely push and absolutely challenge and take points off those top teams, and then just have an absolute wobble out of nowhere for no real reason. But fair play to the Seahawks. Tough game that they came really close to the night before in Peterborough, to then have to go home to then do a trip over to Sheffield and to pick up points like that on the road. That is impressive in that sense. So, I mean, congratulations to Hull on picking up another win. Who gets the wooden spoon, I think, is the question there, and I'd be interested to see thoughts in the chat about that one, about who picks up the wooden spoon. Whether it's the Seahawks or whether it is the Bees, because I don't think that conversation is done 100%. Speaking of the Bees, we head into Sunday. They did not have a good Sunday night, and Telford finally get themselves back in the win column after getting an absolute shellacking on the Saturday night. They managed to come back and they get a very, very decent 7-3 win at home. Goals in all periods, goals across the lines again against the B side that can fluctuate a little bit, I think is probably what we should say there. But if you think that so Howells, Price, Rose, Luca, Herman Watkins, Jessen, so multiple different goal scorers. Walkham, Dan Bradley getting his first goal for the Bees, and Will Stead getting the goal for getting the other goal there for the Bees there. But that's kind of what Telford are going to need to do. Is this game the spark? I think is probably going to be the key question here, because the worry, is, and it was interesting because, I think somebody talked about. Actually, it was Bristol's preview to the weekend. They talked about the fact that the Bison had beaten teams that were below them. Now, the problem with that was Telford were actually above the Bison when they beat them home and home. But but certainly it can be, especially against teams whose road record isn't great, do fluctuate wildly in the quality that they're able to put out. And as well, a team like the Bees who keep sort of coming close, and like Hull just can't quite pull themselves over the edge, over into the win. But there's a lot to be said. A win is a win is a win. They don't count. They all count. 2 points is 2 points in this league, and ultimately, Telford are going to need to get a run together, because if the Bison are allowed to pull away, then that's going to cause an issue for Bristol and Telford, and then three teams for 2 spots becomes 2 teams for 1, and the Bison will obviously need to. Will be looking to sort of pull themselves very much into that 7th spot. It's going to be hard for them to do it, but they are, they certainly feel like they're on a good run at the moment. And ultimately, if they're allowed to get away, Bristol and Telford as a battle for 8th spot will be very interesting, but it's not one either side will really want to be in, especially Telford. Elsewhere on Sunday, the Ralph's Sissenis show in Romford on Sunday, and one again that Romford will be kicking themselves over. A game that they really should have put to bed. 3-0 to the good. 2 goals from Harry Gulliver and 1 from Alex Roberts in this game against Peterborough. And then, I say it a lot about Edgar's Landsbergs. From Latvia with love, Sissenis goes 3+1 on the night in response. You can't ask for much more of a performance out of a player than to just put the game on his back and to pull a team to the win. Obviously, he's not done it alone. He has had some help there, but it should be said that this has always been the big frustration with Ralph Sissenis is look at that. Look at that. Look at those numbers, right? Look at those numbers and look what he was able to do. in terms of just saying, sod this, guys, come with me, we'll do it. So we'll do that. But yeah, just bizarre. Just bizarre. Like I say, the thing with Ralphs is that he's so talented and at times has just made really poor choices. And he's been very quiet this year in terms of some of his antics on ice. And maybe all it took was being in a place that is that structured to bring this out of him. And you know, more power to him. More power to him if he's able to do that. Double header between Hull and BZM will tell us a lot. It will. He is on a good run at the moment. Yes, that's very true. Did I hear that correctly? Rumoured Bird Brayer is heading to Bristol. Rumoured indeed. Yes, rumoured indeed he is heading to Bristol. Cats fans, I know, will be very upset if that does come to fruition. But let's not count our chickens before they hatch on that front. But of course, the issue for Bristol, they've got an import spot spare whilst Owen Sobchuk is going to be out for a little while. And getting somebody of his creative bent will not be easy. But a guy like Brea, if he is going to step in for the Pitbulls, what that adds to them, and the one thing actually this team doesn't have is a massive amount of size and a massive amount of channeled physicality. Don't get me wrong, there'll be an over-under as to how many minutes Max lasts before getting a check into the head penalty if he does come back. But certainly the chances, you know, he will add a different dimension to that Bristol team that arguably they are lacking on that front. You know what? If it works and they can get it to work, then more power to Jamie Elson and everybody really. So, also I think, if I remember rightly, that there was a period where Richie Hargreaves and Brea played together at some point when they were younger. So, you know, who knows on that front. I mean, speaking of Bristol, they didn't have the greatest of Sundays. It should be said. Heading home, they get after losing in Basingstoke, and the scoreline is probably fair from that Basingstoke game as well. But the Wildcats then just absolutely shellac them off their own ice. I know a lot of people said this didn't feel, like it was a 6-1 game, and fair enough. You know, we've had those games where the scoreline just isn't fair on that one. But again, not a 0-point weekend in a weekend they could have arguably gotten 4, needed 4, and didn't. Shout out to the Cats for the symmetry of getting 1 goal, then 2 goals, then 3. I like those kind of things. But at 3-1 down. At the end of the second period there was a chance, and you really needed a big period out of the Pitbulls in that one, and instead they just have no answer. The Wildcats press on and push the game out there. Malazinski, Bebris and Taylor scoring in the final period to kind of end that one as a contest. And this is going to be the issue for Bristol, that they are learning, and I think that's going to be, you know, this will be a learning curve for them, much in the same way that it was for the Chiefs last year, where, you know, they sort of got to, you know, at the beginning of the season, nobody knew what to kind of do with them. Nobody was able to kind of solve them in the immediacy because they were so brand new and nobody kind of knew what was going on. But then you end up with this idea that everybody's kind of gotten, you know, everybody's gotten a way of how to play you, and where you lack that, like I say, just that bit of savvy, that bit of nous, that bit of knowledge as a group, to kind of move past that. Bristol this year are Leeds last year. There's that, they're just young and hungry, but they just haven't had the experience of working in that situation at this level, and therefore they don't necessarily know what to do with it. I think in some ways this could cost Bristol their playoff place as a result. I would really like, and it's not a slight on Telford, but I'd really like Bristol in the playoffs. I think a Bristol Leeds playoff tie, 1st versus 8th, would be really interesting. MK versus Bristol, if Bristol got 7th, for example, in like a 2v7, would be interesting. Peterborough, if they got 2nd place, Peterborough against Bristol would be really interesting, because you'd have the really experienced core that likes to clog everything up against a young hungry group that just likes to slam their way through everything. So there's a lot of really good matchups potentially in the playoffs for Bristol if they do make it, but they've got to make it first, and that's going to be the issue there. a reverse then of Saturday. Hull having won in Sheffield, then lose at home to Sheffield. The Dogs up very, very early here. Goals inside the first 3 minutes. 2-0 up there through Jordan Boycer and John Kirk. Before Nathan Salem got them on the board. But from there, the Dogs kind of pushed themselves out of sight. Ben Morgan, John Boycer, Jason Hewitt, Cam Brownlee making it 6-1 before the death. Emil Svek gets the late consolation, but it's not really enough, and it wasn't enough at the end there, unfortunately. For Hull, 2 points from 6 is not great, but it's potentially more, I think, than a lot of their fans will have thought they were going to come away with in this particular game. And therefore, there's beggars can't be choosers, I think, on that front. But you maybe will have wanted to, at least having won on the Saturday night in Sheffield, you will have wanted to get points out of it. You would have wanted to get points out of it the following night when you were playing at home in a play. Hull's not Hull is a nice enough rink. It's not an easy place to play per se. So I think the fact that it's there is, the chance was there for them to get something out of that, and they didn't get something out of that. And I think that's where they'll be kicking themselves. So nearly getting some points in Peterborough would have been great. Take the game to overtime, but especially having won Saturday, you'll have wanted something out Sunday. And that's kind of the big thing there. And then, well, we've got to talk about it. I'm sorry to all of our MK fans, but we do need to mention this. Because boy was I a happy boy on Sunday evening after this one, because Bison winning in Milton Keynes is about as rare as a decent steak. Deary me. I had a friend of mine who was at the Leeds MK game on Saturday. Sent me a message on Sunday, and we were chatting about bits and pieces, and I said, how was the game? And they said it was brilliant, fast-paced, really good. And I said, oh, thanks for that. We're playing MK today. And, that bodes well. And all they said to me was, they're going to be tired. And you've got a chance here you've got a chance to put them on their backsides and go over them, because they had to expend a lot of energy on Saturday night. And I said, well, so did we against Bristol. And, it was that was a tough game, very playoff kind of mentality. And they said, trust me, they're going to be tired. And credit where it's due, and I know they're my team, and I'm going to say this, but the Bison figured this out, and I'm so pleased that they did. We'll talk about the moment of controversy that is the fact that David Sarkanis has very clearly scored, and that is not good. It's not good at all. And the referee is on the spot, and the referee doesn't see it, and he doesn't think it's gone in. And that is frustrating. You don't want that. You want the referees. We'd all love perfect officiating in all of our games. That would be fantastic if that happened, but it doesn't happen, unfortunately, and it is annoying and it is frustrating. But I think the thing I take from it is that in these things come around. And at the risk of sounding really horrible to a lot of MK supporters, as a Bison fan, we have not got many bounces this year. So for us to get that was really good, was big for us, I think, in that sort of sense. And it's the kind of, sometimes the universe needs to give you one when it's taken 10. But actually, you know what? I think the bigger thing here for the Bison was this was a really good result away at a really good team. At a time they really needed it, and they showed by not going away. And actually, this is a lot of what Milton Keynes' issue was playing Peterborough in the second leg of the cup final. Milton Keynes scored 4 goals in this first period. That game is done. But they let the Bison hang around, just like they let the Phantoms hang around. And if you've got a team who's playing that sort of game plan against you, and you let them hang around, the problem is that they will come back and they will counter you. MK 2-0 up. Bison come back. 3-2 up, come back. 4-3 up on a short-handed goal, come back. And then the Bison got the lead, and the Bison didn't lose the lead, and that's what got them over the line. In this game. But yeah, Sean Norris with a couple of goals early on there. Liam Stewart with a very nice goal, which we said. Tim Wallace's finish for his goal was was pretty good too. But yeah, a couple of goals from Gael Abuele, including the empty netter. George Norcliffe, Edgar Landsberg scores against his former team. So 1, 2, 3, yeah, so 4 goals there for Labuele, 1 for Balach as well. They've just been on fire. Like I say, from a Bison fan perspective, over the moon, because and obviously Leeds fans very happy with Basingstoke for the time being, because it's very much, things are still in the Knights' hands going forward there. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, like I say, MK fans, they have a right to be frustrated off of the back of that. I think the video from the end of the game was quite funny. I'm not going to lie on that front. Watching somebody shout, Labuele hit on Christie. I mean, it would have been better had you put it in, if your guys had put it in the highlights, because I didn't catch it live. The Wikipedia update was hilarious. That was very funny. It wasn't me. I will say this. It wasn't me. Nor was it Bavi, actually. I thought it was Bavi, and it turns out it wasn't. I haven't quite gotten to the bottom of who that was. Should be said, it did go down very well in the Bison dressing room, though. Either way, Bison win, and that really, really helps them in the context of things. As we have a quick look at the National Division table, I'm going to use NHLstats.wordpress.com, our friend Joe Scott's website, of course, because it just looks prettier and there's colours. And we can see there we have 3 qualifiers already for the National Division playoffs in the form of the Leeds Knights, the MK Lightning and the Peterborough Phantoms. The Knights there a point ahead of MK and Peterborough, but with 3 games in hand on both of them. MK over the Phantoms there on the tiebreaker, and then a 10-point drop from 3rd to 4th. Steel Dogs 2 games in hand. You'd think 4th is pretty much going to be theirs, but the Raiders are not out of really putting some pressure on the Wildcats there in 5th. They're 7 points back with 2 games in hand. But Swindon do feel like they're starting to get rolling a little bit now. That said, Sheffield versus Swindon as a 4th versus 5th in the playoffs. How good a tie would that be? I think that's the question we'll chuck out going forward. Who's your team and who you'd like to play in the playoffs? Be realistic, given where you think you're going to finish. So I think you need to, don't say, if we were top, I'd like us to play these people. No. Think about where you're likely to end up and who you'd like to play. Because at the moment, if you look at bits and pieces in terms of who's in the playoffs right now, you'd have Leeds Telford, which is a hell of a thing to have. MK Basingstoke, Peterborough Romford, and Sheffield Swindon as a playoff would be superb. Although if we scroll down, of course, we can see that gap between the Bison and the Raiders. The Bison have played a game more and are 9 points behind. So you think that unless Romford have an absolute nightmare going forward, that there'll be 6th place for sure on Eastern side. But the Bison have opened up that helpful little gap there. 4 points ahead of the 4 points ahead of the Tigers, 6 points ahead of Bristol, having played a game less. So that is decent. That is decent for the Bison. Then down here at the bottom, of course, Hull have played 2 games more than the Bees, but are 3 points behind. But yeah, so is there a way for the Bees to drop down? Do we think? I'd take Raiders. Phantoms Raiders, I think would be either really fun or really boring, because I think I'd be really interested to see how Romford would approach this. I think Bees will finish bottom. Says Niall the Hull fan. Fair play, mate. You keep on believing that one. I will not fault you for a second on that. Can't blame you at all, my good man. You've got to keep believing, even up to the death on that one. But yeah, so like I said, I'm interested. I think from a Basingstoke perspective, given we're most likely to finish 7th, I actually would want MK, because I think we've given them a bit of a wobble now. I think we've put a seed of doubt in their minds about how to play us. And I think if the playoffs started tomorrow, I'd want MK, because I think we'd give them a scare again, and I think that we now know how to kind of play. We now know how to play against them, and I think that's really important. Decent game, been decent game so far. Yeah, playoffs are a little bit of a different beast. Although, like I say, if Sesenis is going to play like that when you go 3 goals in a hole, you're going to do well. Either way, National Division done. Let's have a scoop and have a look at what happened over the weekend in North 1. And quite a big weekend, it should be said, for the Whitley Warriors, as they had a 2-game weekend to Solway's 1-game weekend, meaning that Solway at the end of this weekend have 3 games in hand on the Warriors. But they nearly slipped up on Saturday night, only managing to eke out a 3-2 shootout win down in Blackburn against the Hawks, where Solway, well, they very much put the Dragons to the sword, for want of a better phrase, going all medieval as it were, as they win 7-2 over in North Wales. Billingham. Billingham, apologies, that's from Sunday. But the other game from Saturday, of course, Hockey Day in Nottingham. The Panthers losing in overtime in the evening to the Sheffield Steelers, but Nottingham do get half of the battle with a big 8-2 win at home over the Scimitars, condemning them to yet another defeat in that game. Tons of fun highlights, of course, that were put on the Nottingham Lions social media page, including Zach Yokoyama, who fell over on a penalty shot and still scored 4 goals in this game, because that's what Zach Yokoyama does. Scimitars then had a wretched weekend. 2 goals scored, 14 conceded. They lose 6-0 at home, away on Sunday against Billingham. Deeside, though, as their second home game of the weekend, and they have a much better result, a 5-2 win at home against Widnes in the local derby there. Of course, not many miles between Deeside and Widnes in that one. Solihull have 2 games this weekend, Dragons and Wild. Now, that is, thank you, Volia, for popping up on that one, because of course we do the fixtures afterwards, and actually we can see that Deeside, we can see Solway have got Deeside a little bit further down, but yeah, but like I said, big weekend for the fact that this puts there's certainly 3 games in hand is huge, and Whitley needed to win, and they do win 5-2 over Solihull. I made a point of listening to Bay Hockey. Bay Hockey Radio, apologies, I've completely forgotten their name, but the sort of the webcast commentary that they have up in Whitley Bay, really interesting sounding game. Hat-trick from Adam Finlayson in this game as well, who sounded like he had a fantastic performance. Solid win for Whitley against a Solihull side that's slowly starting to claw its way into being a big contender in this division. Nottingham then managed to lose 4-3 at home to Blackburn, having had a really good win the day before. I think, unfortunately, the score, the Lions just kind of overthought this one. I think the Blackburn arguably could have won this game by more, having watched it live. But it was a decent game all in all. Like I say, if you haven't had the opportunity to kind of check out Nottingham Lions streams, as you know, they are the unofficial team of the What's Current stream, and we do have a lot of fun. Adam, what did I say? What did I say his name was? I thought I said, in my head I've said Adam Finlayson. What have I just called him? Did I call him Aaron? And I think it's because in those sort of situations, somebody does something of note and I instantly think it's Aaron Connolly. So sorry about that. But yes, it's definitely Adam Finlayson. And I always remember Finlayson because that's a different... I'm always about to call him something else. And then I remember, no, it's Finlayson. And there's the T-shirt for you, Whitley. Either way, Bay Hockey Radio's Adam McMahon... gotcha. Sorry, I thought I called him something else there. There we go. Thank you for that. But either way, as we can see, Whitley do go top, having, albeit I venture it will probably be briefly at the moment. But their 4-point weekend sees them 2 points ahead of Solway. But Solway have 3 games in hand, of which, as we've just mentioned, is going to have a couple of those games this weekend. And then they have 4 games in hand over Billingham, who are 5 points behind them. Although that said, that middle pack. That sort of middle 3 that we've got there in North 1 of Billingham, Solihull and Widnes, massively entertaining stuff between these 3 sides. It's a bit of a shame really we can't sort of watch them. What's your thoughts on the Warriors changing fixtures so they can watch Newcastle versus Man United Cup final? I think it's really... I have a problem with it, as you can appreciate, because has this been agreed? Because of course the Nottingham Lions came out and said, we've not agreed to this. And I get why... Here's the thing. I get why Whitley would want to move that fixture, because that is a game where they are meant to be at home against Billingham on a weekend where there will be nobody paying attention to their local derby at all. Because with all the will in the world, as much as we all love hockey, that neck of the woods, if Newcastle United are in a cup final, ain't nobody going near it. Not enough people are going near an ice rink, right? So I get why Whitley would want to move it. I think moving it without seemingly having checked with the Lions about it and potentially even the IHA is going to cause a problem. This, of course, leads back into some of the issues that teams have had with Nottingham cancelling, postponing games over during the period of the university games, because it's turnabout fair play. Now, for me, two wrongs don't make a right. If Nottingham have caused a problem, that's Nottingham and the IHA to deal with. But for Whitley, from seemingly what they've done of just unilaterally saying we're swapping our games around, I mean, that's not good either. And I think that's Whitley kind of trying to play... It feels like Whitley trying to play a little bit of politics as one of the big teams in that league. And they definitely are one of the big teams in the league. As a sore point, however, the Lions have had issues icing players and completing fixtures. So Whitley trying to move one game is nothing. Well, from what I understand is that it's quite an issue that the Lions are not in people's good books as a result of what they did. So I'd be interested to see what happens on kind of both sides of that equation and what they can kind of find. There's got to be a resolution in there somewhere, I think, and the game should be played at some point. But it's just a case of kind of people sitting down and being sensible about it. But there's a right and a wrong way of going about it, and I think probably Whitley can't just unilaterally just say we're doing it if the Lions have gone, well, hang on a second, we got to check, because the Lions, from my understanding, the Lions tried to do a lot of legwork about moving some of their games around. Has the same thing happened? There's a lot of things that are kind of going on in the background that we can kind of suppose about but not really get, as it were. Lobby want to watch Son play for Newcastle. Of course he would. I don't blame him. That's probably why he's got tickets for it. But either way, as we can see there, from the table, there we go, that way, backwards. Table is there. But D-side, of course, are still clawing into it. They've got 5 games in hand on Blackburn, 3 games in hand on Widnes. D-side can pull themselves into that middle pack as well. Nottingham, you think, are pretty much a lock on for 8th place. Sheffield, with their 1 point, are bottom, and they're going to stay bottom for the time being, you'd think, on that one. I personally think it's nice to see the Warriors supporting that. I don't disagree on that front. I just think that, you've got to do it the right way. I think you've got to do it the right way. And I don't necessarily see why the IHA would have had an issue with it, because, like I say, it's the fact that the Lions have gone out publicly and said, hold up, what's going on? We haven't agreed to it. That's the issue here. Why has that happened? And then how can we resolve it? That's the thing I'm personally looking at on that front. But you can't blame David Longstaff for wanting to get as many people down to support his lads in one of the biggest games in Newcastle United's recent history. I can't blame that at all. If nothing else, I have no issue with Newcastle United winning. As a Bournemouth fan, it's nice to see Eddie doing well, because he's a good boy and we like Eddie Howe. Either way, I'm just sort of looking at the time, and I'm just conscious that I'm slowly still adjusting a little bit to kind of flicking between bits and pieces. So let's just click that, because we need to have a look at South one. And yeah, another not great weekend for the MK Thunder. Two games, 4 goals scored, 24 conceded for the Thunder. Just after I'd praised them during the week as well for improved performances, and they get absolutely thumped 8-0 and 16-4, respectively, by Oxford and Invicta. Not tons of action actually on Saturday. Only the 2 games in the entire division there, as Romford beat Slough 3-2. That's a big dent to the Jets' hopes of getting second spot in South 1. But then Oxford, a great weekend for the City Stars, as they managed to get a 4-point weekend, which will really help them sort of cement themselves as not being near the bottom of the table. Slough, though, 2 defeats in regulation. One of those, of course, being at home against Solent. But Solent are such a consistent side that it's impossible to ever count Solent out of it. Not many big name superstars, especially as well with the one big superstar they have being Sasenis, having gone to the national division. But just solid net mining from Chico Cole consistently, and as a group they just keep finding a way to make things work. And then of course Streatham, who are by far and away the big team in that division, 6-1 against Chelmsford is a massive statement of intent. Petr Cech in net, of course, there for the Chieftains in that one, and for all the quality of a netminder that we know he has, he was unable to save them this time from getting a bit of a kicking. Like I said, a very light schedule for South One, all things considered this weekend. Ollie Nags is a prospect for the Thunder. Many in MK think he'll be playing for the Lightning next season. The boy can skate. Yeah, I've heard good things about Ollie as well. I'm interested to see as well what happens for MK, because you think there's a few players, of course, that could potentially definitely not be there next year. And I mean, like, will Chamberlain stay? Will Norris stay? Will Talbot stay? It's impossible really to know at this point. So having young guys like Ollie Nags being able to come through will do them a world of good. Either way, the South 1 table paints a very, very familiar picture. Streatham with only the one game, but they stay well ahead of the competition, 4 points ahead of Solent with 2 games in hand over the Devils. But the Devils, having beaten with Slough having a 0-point weekend and Invicta only playing once, they have opened quite a sizable gap there, 9 points. They have played a game more than Invicta and 2 games more than Slough, but the points difference means that the Devils are pretty comfortable in second spot there. Chelmsford, well, they obviously won't be very, very happy. They've played 2 games more than Slough. They're a point behind. They could have really used a result against Streatham. But of course, the Chieftains and the Dynamos do have the cup final to look forward to. So even though it's been a very mixed year for the Chieftains, obviously sacking coach Mark Saunders, a bottom half of the table finish potentially on the cards there for them. There's going to have to be a bit of a rethink potentially in the summer for the Chieftains as to how they approach things. But if they can find a way to knock Invicta off and take home the cup, it will certainly make things feel a lot nicer. And also, a 4 versus 5 playoff quarter final against the Jets. The Chieftains would not count themselves out of it. Norris to Belfast, Talbot to Coventry, J-Mo and Christie to retire. So all the more reason for guys like Ollie Nags to get pulled through. But then, as you can see, Romford, Oxford with that 4-point weekend. Level on points there with Romford. Not out of the question if things happen for Oxford that they could get themselves into that 6th spot. Although, they wouldn't particularly fancy either Invicta or Solent in the playoffs. Not great for them either way. MK seem, of course, destined for a home and home playoff quarter final against the Streatham Redhawks in that one. I do not envy them in the slightest. And then, of course, we end up looking towards what has been what has very much been a 2-horse race, but one that has at least been an interesting 2-horse race. It should be said, which is North 2. And of course, the battle between Telford and Hull for who gets the regular season title, or in fact just all the titles in that division, rumbles on. They will, of course, meet in the cup final before too long. As we can see, they do meet next weekend. As well. But yeah, Telford with a booming 7-1 win over Bradford in Bradford. Hull whacking Altrincham 8-1 in Hull on Saturday night. A pretty comfortable weekend for the teams at the top of the table. And then everybody else kind of got to go on Sunday. Altrincham squeaking out a 3-2 win over the Sheffield Titans. Another good win for the Coventry Blaze, though. Obviously Nottingham are below them in the table, but this decent run of form from the NIHL Blaze really could make them an interesting dark horse come playoff time when the North 2 playoffs do roll around. Bradford, well, they're condemned to another 0-point weekend as Sutton put 6 goals past them in Sheffield. But yeah, certainly, like I say, the big game coming up this weekend then in North 2 with the with Hull and Telford due to meet, because when we skip, of course, back to the North 2 table, level on points, Telford hold the tiebreak at the moment, 12 points clear the lot of them, having played a game less than Altrincham. It's a 2-horse race at the top of that division, make no mistake about it. But as we talked about, that good run from the Coventry Blaze, they've got themselves up into 4th place now. They have played 2 more games than Sutton, so Sutton, of course, very, very much still in that race for 3rd, and getting themselves a good playoff draw. But who are those games in hand going to be against? Coventry, though, sticking around. They're on a really good recent run. Towards the bottom, of course, though, Bradford haven't won for a little while. Nottingham are just a point ahead of Bradford, thanks to that 1 extra overtime loss that they've had there. Then there's South 2, and South 2 had an absolutely huge couple of games this weekend, as we were well aware. That home and home series between the Haringey Huskies and the Guildford Phoenix, and well, advantage Guildford all things considered there, because the Phoenix not only win in Ali Pali on Saturday night, but they also get the win at home in Guildford on the Sunday as well. They a 4-1 win at Alexandra Palace against the Huskies, with them followed up by a 1-0 win at home in Guildford on the Sunday. A massive 4-point weekend for the Phoenix in that one. But Bristol not going away in that title discussion either. A 7-2 win in their local derby over Swindon keeps them very, very much on the pace too. Elsewhere, well, the Solent Devils, after their extra win they got last weekend, couldn't repeat the feat. They lose 8-2 away at Chelmsford. And Streatham, well, they're starting to fall away a little bit in this title discussion in South too. A 7-3 loss away in Kent against the Invicta Mustangs, definitely causing some issues there. We did wonder, of course, Basingstoke Buffalo have had a pretty wretched year. Only 2 wins all season going into this one, an 11-2 walloping of the Lee Valley Lions in Basingstoke on Sunday. Certainly will have eased things there, and a good win for the Swindon Wildcats as well, recovering from Saturday night to win 8-3 at home against Chelmsford. And then there's Peterborough and Oxford, which of course caused a little bit of controversy of itself. Allegations of racist chanting thrown out against fans in Peterborough. One person ejected from the game. A complaint currently open, is my understanding, with the EIHA about this one. Not really much of a statement from either side, unfortunately. It's being left to the EIHA to kind of investigate. We will see what happens going forward in that one. I saw a few bits and pieces thrown about, but apparently, yeah, some very unseemly chanting, both of a racist and non-racist nature, reported from people in the building there. The Welling nearly into the top 10 in terms of points. Level 10th with Disco. Disco ahead through scoring more goals. Did we do that? I thought points is points. Goal scoring chart is goal scoring chart. So he's joint 10th, is what you're telling me. But either way, really like I say, there's a very interesting season. I think it's been at the top end of South too, when it comes to, we've had teams sort of in and out of that title discussion, but it really does start to feel a little bit like Streatham are starting to fall away there. So Guildford go top because of the head-to-head between themselves and Haringey. Bristol, though, 3 games in hand on Haringey, 2 games in hand on Guildford, but only 3 points behind. So the Pitbull's still very much in the conversation. But that loss to Invicta has really dented their title chances. 26 points from 19 games. So they've played 2 games more than Bristol and are 2 points behind. Invicta then have pulled themselves up a little bit. They've obviously got themselves very solidly in 5th. Peterborough, Swindon, whose decent run of form is still sort of, they've had a few losses recently, but still a decent run of form for them recently. And Cardiff make up the playoffs, albeit Chelmsford have played a game less and are 2 points behind. I don't know the head-to-head off the top of my head. The Rising Stars have had a couple of decent results recently, and they're pulling themselves in. However, this bottom section here, Basingstoke, you think are pretty much going to be set where they are in 11th. I don't think Solent or Lee Valley will catch them, but the race is still very much on for the wooden spoon in South 2. But there we go, we've done it. We've gone literally just about to the hour, but we've gone through every game of all 5 divisions involved in the National Ice Hockey League. So, questions, comments, throw bits and pieces out. Let's have a chat about some things we got to the end. I will get the fixtures up and kind of ready to go for us all here. So that will help, of course, as people are kind of getting bits and pieces into the chat, and I try to breathe for a couple of seconds. But yeah, I think certainly for me, I'm really interested. The Basingstoke Swindon on Saturday is going to be huge. Which, like I said, let's just get I'm just going to get the fixtures all kind of lined up so we can kind of flick from point to point here, as people are kind of getting stuff into the chat. Just realised, of course, how close we are to the end of fixtures in the whatchamacallit in North 2, just because of the way things go. Let's just get them on bits and pieces ready here. There we go. Just trying to get the stuff there. That's the national there. But yeah, I'm just trying to be clever here for a second and get everything sort of loaded up, ready to roll, so we can kind of skip from one to the other. Racism incident in Peterborough on Saturday night. Some horrendous stuff. Speaking to one of the Rising Stars players on Sunday in MK. But yeah, like I say, there's been I've seen some pushback from people in Peterborough. I've seen some bits and pieces from folks that throw it the other way, saying that that this has definitely happened. But from my understanding, the City Stars have kind of have put it to the IHA to kind of sort out as it were at the moment, and we'll wait for any investigation on that to kind of happen. I think is probably the best thing to do right now, obviously. But statements have been given to the IHA, is my understanding, having spoken to people at Oxford, kind of connected to what's going on. But yeah, like I say, we'll I'll kind of open the door a bit, free for all. What do we think? What do we think of the new presentation? What do we think of OBS and how it's going? Fingers crossed for a 4-point weekend for Hull. 4 fingers crossed in front, 4 hands crossed in front there, and also very impressive there. But what do we think? Do we like the shiny? Do we like the graphics and stuff? Obviously, this is night 1, and I'm still learning how to use what I've got here. But obviously, it'd be great to kind of add more bits, do more bits with it, make things a little bit shinier as I go. But I'm really pleased. It feels quite an intuitive thing to do, and I've kind of gotten myself used to doing it. But do we like transitions and bits and pieces like that? I'm aware that there's a lot that can be done with OBS from my understanding. But do we like this? Do we like the presentation? Do we like how it is? Obviously, rather than it just be me talking over stuff and you've got other stuff on the screen, I think that's probably quite good, is my understanding. That'd be my guess. But what do we like? What do we don't like? And if you can help with graphics, that'd be really good too. Because like I say, I am terrible at such things. It'd be really helpful if someone could give me a hand, or if you know someone who'd be interested, then let me know. That'd be really, really helpful too. Either way, let's have a quick squiz at the fixtures for the upcoming weekend. He says, having just realised he's managed to do that. So let's scoot that down a little bit. There we go. That's better. There we go. So obviously, as we can see, Friday, Leeds and Sheffield with being the only face-off. Like I say, a big game for the Knights. If the Knights can get a decent win here, then you think that is one. Even though it's only February, the middle of February, that's one hand on the title. Basingstoke Swindon on Saturday night, of course, will be there. If you're there yourself, do make sure you come and say hello. Bristol and the Bees, the Bees both will be looking to sort of rebound from some interesting results. Of course, Bees with at least got some points out of last weekend, whereas Bristol didn't. MK will be looking to rebound from their disappointing loss to Basingstoke. You think that they had a real chance to claw themselves back even more into the title race than they already are. Losing to the Bison, I have a horrible feeling, Hull, that they're going to take it out on the Seahawks come Saturday night. Peterborough versus Telford should be an interesting one. There. The Tigers obviously coming with a little bit of momentum after their win against the Bees. How will they fare in Peterborough come that weekend? And then the other game on Saturday, Sheffield take on the Raiders. Raiders with a bad weekend for them last weekend, all things considered, given the fact that they ended up with 0 points out of the weekend, especially having been 3-0 up against Peterborough into the bargain. Sunday then, Bees and Phantoms. You probably think the Phantoms will be okay on that one. Hull Basingstoke. Now this obviously went very well for Basingstoke last time, and everybody in Hull seemed to think that Gail Lebwele is the best thing since sliced bread. Can the Bison keep their good form rolling? Obviously, a lot will depend on Saturday night's game against Swindon. Raiders versus Knights. This could be tricky for Leeds because Raiders are going to want to start making some statements as they push themselves forward. Lots of pink kits this weekend. Yep, indeed. I don't like Valentine shirts myself. Swindon MK could be another potential banana skin for the Lightning there as well. But of course we're in there, and then Telford versus Sheffield should be an interesting game. I'm interested to see how Rory Herman does with the way Sheffield play hockey, given some of his tendencies and him fighting Sami Zajac recently. And of course, as we know, heading into half term, so we are seeing a couple of games during the week. And the Knights, of course, are in the middle of this massive run of games where they play on Tuesday. They can play Tuesday night and they play on Wednesday night, both on the road. They play Sheffield and they play the Raiders. Now, of course, that Raiders game will be going on whilst we're streaming. I don't think I can get away with showing the stream on here, but what we could possibly look at doing is at least we'll chat over the top of bits and pieces. We'll start things as we usually do at 8, and we'll just keep tabs as we go on that one. South one then for the weekend very quickly. Romford hosting Streatham, which Streatham, having spoken to Ryan Watt recently, they're treating every game like it's a cup final at the moment. They just want to press on and they want to get the title wrapped up as soon as they possibly can. Slough versus Invicta, a big game there in sort of the middle pack there of South one. Solent at home to Oxford. You put your money on Solent there probably on Saturday night. Sunday then, Invicta versus Chelmsford. That'll be a decent tilt as those two sides look towards the South One Cup final. Oxford versus MK in a battle of the bottom two. Can Oxford pull further away from Milton Keynes and further themselves get themselves closer towards Romford in the mix where it comes to that one? Up in the north, well, there's only one game on Saturday as the Great D-Side Catch-Up Tour continues. Solway travelled to D-Side on Saturday evening, after another recent visit for them. Sunday then, well, Whitley are playing, and so are Solway. So Solway, of course, were caught up, so they'll only be the two games in hand by the end of it. Solway travelled to Widnes. Solihull host Whitley, having played up at Hillheads last weekend. D-Side have a bit of a longer journey. They go up to Billingham to take on the Stars. That should be a really interesting game. D-Side have struggled to get teams together to get guys to travel. So you hope if they can get a decent roster together that will be a really, really interesting game. If D-Side travel short bench, you wouldn't put your money against the Stars on that one. In North 2 then, one of the headline games. We thought South 2 last weekend was a bit of a big one. Telford, Hull, 7 p.m. in Shropshire. If you're in the area and you're a Tigers fan and you're a Hull fan and you can't get to your respective team's games, get yourself over to Telford and watch this one. It is going to be a ding-dong battle. Winner takes all, it feels a little bit like in that one. Sunday then, just the two games in this one. Third place, fourth in that battle to kind of get higher playoff seeding. Altrincham versus Coventry in Manchester, and then Nottingham versus Bradford in a battle of the bottom two. I believe that Lions 2 game will be streamed on the Lions YouTube page if you want to keep tabs on that one. And then South 2, plenty of action this weekend there in South 2 as well, although not as much as there could be. Can Haringey recover from their bad weekend against Guildford as they take on Peterborough at Alexandra Palace on Saturday? Invicta and Cardiff, of course, playing for playoff positions. They will meet down in Kent. Oxford looking to really try and play themselves in, take on Lee Valley on Saturday night, and then travel to Basingstoke the next day. Something of, well, what is almost akin to a local derby between these two sides. Sort of a coming home, as it were, for Rising Stars netminder Ben Mollett, of course, a former Bison junior, heading home to take on the Buffalo there. Guildford are in action. They have Chelmsford. You wouldn't put your money against the Phoenix in that one. Although another potential banana skin for Streatham, they desperately need a win to keep themselves in the title picture as they take on Solent on the high road on Sunday night. And that's the fixtures for this coming weekend in the National Ice Hockey League. And there we go, we're towards the end. So we'll say final call, last bits and pieces, as it were, for the end of it. Questions, comments, anything else anybody wants to throw in. Door is open. Pick your hockey, pick your poison, anything you want to say. So we'll do take a couple of bits and pieces before we go down. Obviously, tons and tons of pink kits this weekend, as it were, ahead of bits and pieces. Solway to National. Yeah, it's obviously going to be a topic. It's going to be a topic from now until the end of the year, until potentially the end of the National Division 1 final if Solway make it again. This is up to the club. I've said it before. I said it on social media during the week. I think Solway should be in the National. I think they would be a great addition to the National. I know some people said that they didn't want a conference split because we've been playing certain teams too many times. They didn't want this. They didn't want that. 11 teams is not right. It doesn't feel good as a setup for what we have. 12 would be better. Regionalised conferences would be a way forward for this. GB Euro Challenge games, of course, this weekend. GB now have no excuses when it comes to Worlds in May. We've always talked about them having more warm-up games and bits and pieces like that. Here they go. If you're heading to those games in MK, Coventry and Nottingham, do enjoy yourself. I'm sure there'll be superb entertainment. I'm interested to see who they have doing the webcast commentary. If it's who I believe it is going to be, I'll be a very, very happy boy. Whether National League Cup finals fixtures being announced, I don't know off the top of my head, because this will be between the clubs to organise. I don't believe they've been announced at the moment. What I will do very quickly, let's just have a quick squiz into the national fixtures. Are they listed at the moment on Joe's site? They are not. They're not currently listed on NHL stats. And Joe would be the person I would normally check for these kind of bits and pieces. But keep an eye out, Andrew, because of course we will get them before too long. And you know that Leeds Peterborough final will be very, very interesting. A potential 1 versus 2, but even then 1 versus 3 in the league, still going to be a pretty decent tie. Do not put the Phantoms out of your mind in this one. This is not going to be a walkover for the Knights by any stretch of the imagination. NHL All-Star Game, of course, recently just gone. Kirill Kaprizov looking like he wanted to be anywhere else but there. And then, of course, we've got the wholesome one, the big star of the show, of course, Sergei Ovechkin, looking like the best one. 3 conferences of 4 is better than 2 conferences of 6. Yeah, I think you've got to be careful, though, because we don't want teams overplaying. And also, you'd have a Southern Conference there, because do Romford go into sort of a Midlands Conference with like MK, Peterborough and Telford? That sucks for Romford. That really sucks for Romford. Almost you'd wonder whether you have like an Eastern or Western Conference, right? And do it that way. But I don't think that would work either. That certainly wouldn't work for Bristol because they don't have a conference with Solway. Somebody loses out, and it's probably Peterborough because they're further north. In that circumstance, you'd want a Southern Conference. My first season watching the league, I found it very competitive. Yeah, I would agree, Andrew. I think the National Division has been much more competitive than the Elite League. Actually, let me slightly change that, because of course what we do have is we have a very, very marked split in the league of kind of like a top 3, and then kind of like a middle 3, and then everybody else, and sort of like a bottom 5 kind of hash things out, although it's starting to slowly pull itself apart. The slinky's stretched out a bit now, where you've got Leeds, MK and Peterborough at the top, Sheffield, Swindon and Romford kind of in the middle, and then Basingstoke, Telford, Bristol, Hull and Bristol, sorry, and they're sort of a 3, and then Hull and Bees at the bottom. And actually what you have got is you've got for me at least, a level of competitiveness is higher than the level above it. And certainly I think the issue with South 1 and North 1 is that it's very, very marked in terms of teams can beat each other on any given night, but there's just that level of quality that really, really marks out. When you look at a division, I think when you looked at this division, there were about, for the National Division, you could have picked more than a few teams as to who you thought could have won it. If you look at North 1, it's really only giving me 1 or 2 teams. If you look at South 1, I mean, you'd have been a brave person to bet against Streatham on that one. North 2 is kind of 2 teams and then everybody else, but at least there's a level, but at least there's sort of a level there. And then South 2 is just bonkers. South 2 is all over the shop, and really South 2 has too many teams in it. When you think you have 8 in South 1 and 14 in South 2, there's no reason why you couldn't have a 10 and 12 and have 2 extra teams playing up into South 1. And for me, I'd be looking at 2 of the top 3 potentially stepping up into South 1. Maybe pull Haringey up with their big crowds, pulling up Guildford with their decent depth that they've got. Bristol, of course, have got a decent side. MK and Peterborough have to be together. No, they don't, and I will let you know why. Because if they play themselves, because firstly, you're wrong. It's not the best rivalry in the league, and secondly, the one thing that the Sheffield Nottingham rivalry has suffered from is playing each other too much. And I think actually playing each other less sometimes makes a rivalry better. And I think MK and Peterborough have played each other so much, so often, that I think there's a real argument for them playing each other less and making that rivalry mean more. In terms of better rivalries in the league, I think Leeds and Sheffield are developing quite a fun rivalry. For me, Bison versus Bees. It's the biggest rivalry I can think of for me. There's no other games that touch it. They're at the bottom end of the table. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where that rivalry is in the bottom, whether one team's at top, one team's at bottom, or both top or both bottom. For me, nothing touches Bison and Bees as a rivalry game. From a personal opinion, I'm hugely biased on that, and I don't dispute that one. MK and Peterborough games have benefited, I think, from the fact that neither side has really been near the bottom of their respective divisions for a while when they've been in the same league. I mean, that last MK Elite League team might have lost to the Peterborough Phantoms at times, but it looked like. But I don't think MK and Peterborough necessarily need to be together. There is a higher likelihood that Bison and Bees would end up in a conference together because of how you do that. Although you could feasibly do a conference that was Swindon, Bristol, Swindon, Bristol, Telford, and who else would you kind of put into that one? Yeah, you'd have to kind of split up MK unless you kind of do a 6 and a 6, because otherwise I'm not sure how you work out those conferences if you want to do 3 or 4, Jamie. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that one, because I assume you do Bristol, Swindon, Basingstoke, Bees, but then you end up with Romford, MK, Peterborough, and Telford. Is that how you do that one? And then do Solway. Who gets the crowds as well? But yeah, but you still get the crowds whether they played each other 15 times or 2 times, I think, on that one. I don't blame you for wanting cash into the club. Don't get me wrong. For me, I'm never going to say MK Peterborough is a bigger rivalry than Basingstoke and Bracknell. It's just not for me. Disagree on this point. We will. And disagreement is not disaster, my friends. Either way, we've gone quite long. We're going to call... On the first night of this new era, thank you for bearing with me. We're going to call it there. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source for everything related to the Basingstoke Bison. Player comings, player goings, match reports from running from the Herd series, and all kinds of great stuff, including our Hockey Stories series. The wild, weird and wonderful world of hockey, long-form written piece content going back into the 19th century. We go back as far as the man who designed the Canadian flag, into the early days of the Spengler Cup, into World War II, through and beyond the Iron Curtain, into the modern day, into today's NHL. All massive amounts of stuff there for you to read on the website, as well as the back catalogue of the old BOTW podcast. That's there too, as well as Dice Hockey, our tabletop ice hockey game, free to download. It's there on the website for you, free to download. All I ask is that if you do enjoy it, please do consider making a donation to Parkinson's UK. That's what I did when I first started doing it. So if you play the game and you enjoy it, stick a $5 towards them. That would be really, really appreciated. But of course, tons of stuff there for you of all ilk on bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Facebook.com/bannersonthewall. That is if you like getting your news to your Facebook feed, everything that goes on the website and a few other bits, of course, do go on there. So make sure you like the page if you haven't already. Best place to catch up with me and what I'm doing and my commentary kind of across hockey from across the world, as well as getting the links to everything that goes onto the website. Twitter is there at BannersOTW. Just hit 2,000 followers, which is really, really nice. I feel like I've tried to be active in different ways, not just doing the same thing again and again, and it's proven really good. There's been lots of discussion, so thank you for kind of finally getting me over the 2,000 hurdle. I said I wanted to do it before the end of the season, and I got there. So thank you very much to all of you for your support there. And of course, Wednesday nights, 8 PM here on YouTube, the BOTW What's Current stream. If you aren't already, please hit the subscribe button. Please tick the bell for notifications. That'd be massively appreciated. These things all work on sort of engagement and algorithms and stuff. And we are the What's Current stream is the first, and as far as we're only live show that covers all 5 levels of the NHL National Division here throughout the NHL season. Wednesday nights, 8 PM for the What's Current stream. Well, thank you for the first of the new era, as it were, and hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we'll try it again next week with the same level of stuff. So I'm certainly happy at the moment, but hopefully you two are. Be happy. If you can't be happy, then please do be safe. As my friend Scotty Wars would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe, and so long till next time. Hopefully this has gone well, I think. Let's see if it all works.